Most criminals think they're smarter than the system. They think they've erased every trace, covered every angle, and beaten every investigative technique ever created. But the truth is far less glamorous. Because in almost every case, it isn't the master plan that catches up with them. It's the tiny mistake they never even realized they made. One overlooked movement, one careless word, one piece of digital noise they didn't know their body was making. And that mistake becomes the loudest clue investigators could ever ask for. Tonight, we break down the simple errors criminals make that always give them away. Not to glorify crime, but to understand the patterns, the psychology, and the investigative tactics that reveal the truth. If you're a longtime follower of cold case stories, you already know one thing. No one outsmarts the evidence, and the evidence doesn't lie. Let's begin. Mistake number one is overconfidence. Criminals believe planning is the same as perfection. They believe that if they run through the scenario in their head enough times, nothing can go wrong. But the first thing they forget is this. Investigators study these patterns every day. Detectives don't guess. They compare behaviors, they map timelines, they examine emotional shifts, they look for what doesn't fit. A criminal might think wiping fingerprints makes them invisible, but they forget that wiping fingerprints leaves wipe patterns. They think using a mask hides their identity, but they forget that hiding your face in public draws more attention, not less. They think avoiding cameras protects them, but they forget that avoiding cameras is itself a pattern investigators look for. Overconfidence blinds them, and that blindness becomes the first mistake. Mistake number two is believing they can control the scene. There is an old saying in forensic science. They always leave something behind, even if they don't realize it. A footprint in soft soil, a piece of thread from a jacket, a fingerprint on a surface they didn't notice, a cell phone ping bouncing off a tower they didn't know existed. Even the best planned crimes fail because the smallest overlooked detail becomes the biggest clue. What criminals don't understand is that modern forensics doesn't need a lot. It needs a spark. Investigators know how to turn that spark into a fire. Digital forensics, location history, timestamp analysis, smart device logs, background noise in phone calls, movement patterns tracked by streetlights or vehicles. Crime scenes aren't isolated points, they're ecosystems of information. Investigators once examined a suspect who insisted they had been asleep at the time of the crime. Calm, resting, no movement. But their wearable health tracker told a different story. Instead of sleep, it showed a massive spike in heart rate and frantic bursts of motion during the exact window the crime took place. The suspect didn't know their body was recording them. They didn't know every step, every stress response, every spike in adrenaline was being documented silently, second by second. Mistake number three, psychological slip-ups. Criminals think no one is watching. They think as long as they act normal, they'll look innocent. But behavior never lies. People under stress change their patterns. They over-explain. They rehearse stories too often. They forget details they shouldn't forget. They remember details no innocent person would remember. Investigators don't look for confessions. They look for inconsistencies. A liar's story collapses under pressure, not because they lack creativity, but because they lack emotional consistency. Real memories feel different from invented ones. Real memories are messy. Lies are too clean, too perfect. And perfection is suspicious. One of the biggest tells is when criminals return to the scene of the crime. They tell themselves it's to blend in, to appear cooperative, but the internal motive is always emotional. Guilt, fear, curiosity, ego. Investigators know that people rarely revisit traumatic scenes unless they have something unresolved inside them, and criminals always do. Mistake number four, The biggest mistake criminals make isn't physical. It isn't digital. It isn't even logical. It's emotional. Fear leaves patterns. Guilt leaves patterns. Ego leaves patterns. The psychology exposes the holes in the plan long before physical evidence surfaces. When a criminal thinks they've won, their behavior shifts. They breathe differently. They talk differently. They relax too soon. They betray themselves before the investigation ever does. Fear is even more revealing. When investigators ask a suspect a question they weren't expecting, the body reacts before the brain can respond. Micro-expressions, sudden changes in posture, delay in answering, emotional leakage. You can fake a story, but you can't fake instinct. Instinct exposes everything. Mistake number 5 is underestimating investigators. Every message, every alibi, every timeline is a puzzle. Criminals fall apart when they think the puzzle is too big for anyone to solve. But investigators don't look at puzzles the way criminals expect. They don't search for the whole picture. They search for the piece that doesn't belong. And once they find that one piece, the rest collapses. For example, someone might claim they were home during the time of the crime. The alibi sounds strong. It sounds rehearsed. It sounds airtight. But what about the smart speaker that recorded footsteps when no one was supposed to be awake? What about the light sensor detecting movement at a time that contradicts their statement? What about the vehicle caught on a distant traffic camera matching their car's make and model at a time they swore they were somewhere else? Investigators know the truth isn't hidden in perfect stories. It's hidden in the cracks of imperfect ones. Mistake number 6 is thinking technology is neutral. Criminals believe turning off their phone makes them untraceable. What they don't know is that turning off a phone creates a digital silence investigators look for. A dead zone, a blackout period. And blackout periods are suspicious. They raise questions. Why was the device active all day except during the window of the crime? Why did movement resume only after the incident ended? Silence is information. Absence is evidence. Mistake number 7 is believing they can outthink pressure. Interrogations aren't designed to extract confessions. They're designed to create psychological imbalance. Investigators watch for contradictions. They ask questions out of order. They revisit details in different tones. They present information in ways that aren't linear. Criminals fold because they're trying to remember a lie, not a memory. Memories come naturally. Lies require maintenance. Under pressure, lies collapse. Mistake number 8 is trusting the wrong people. Criminals think loyalty exists in desperate situations. But fear breaks loyalty. Money breaks loyalty. Pressure breaks loyalty. When one person cracks, the entire operation falls apart. Co-conspirators betray each other for immunity, lighter sentences, or simply because the guilt becomes too heavy to carry. Trust might hold a plan together, but betrayal tears it apart from the inside. Mistake number 9 is not understanding how pattern recognition works. Investigators don't need every detail. They need anomalies. They need mismatches. They need one thing that doesn't align with human nature. That's where the case begins. And criminals always leave mismatches. They don't follow natural behavior patterns when they're hiding something. They're too careful, too rehearsed, too controlled. And control is a red flag. Mistake number 10 is the ending most criminals never see coming. They think the danger ends once they hide the evidence. But they forget that evidence isn't the only thing investigators study. They study stress. They study routine disruption. They study relationship changes. They study digital silence. They study movement spikes. They study the emotional footprint left behind. The health tracker wasn't unique. It was just one example in a long chain of cases where the body itself betrayed the criminal. Heart rate spikes during the time of the crime, irregular movement patterns, sudden bursts of adrenaline, changes in sleep cycles. Technology listens to your breathing, to your movement, to your heart. And sometimes those clues solve the case before investigators even knock on a door. So the question becomes, what gives criminals away the fastest? The flaws in their plan, or the flaws in their character? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your comment might unlock the next video topic. This is Cold Case Stories. And remember, the truth has a way of exposing itself.